I remember days they used to laugh at me. Used to show them on my records talking casually. Used to say it was a passion on my path to be. Then they told me that I couldn't, so I had to be. Tell me what they really think about it now. Used to hate it, but I guarantee they're proud. Had to do it just to show them that I could, yeah. Now I finally think I took it where I should, yeah. Had jokes on you and now you're on and laughing. I did a whole lot of winning. Look, it came from a passion. I see a whole lot of knowings. I could see now in public and that may think a lot of things. Man, at least think something. Now you the judge. Hey, now tell me where you ended up. Yeah. Look, I bet it was a simple job. Yeah. Look, I went and took a different route. Yeah. Look, that's why my life is different now. Back in my feelings, look, when I wasn't so gifted and I was learning to do this, and all I heard were the critics, and I don't blame you for that shit. Look, I was way out the basis, but I just needed some talent so I could wait this to greatness. Oh yeah, you ain't ever think this, no, no, no. Stop me while I started, homie, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now this shit settled, it's go better and better, but I'll always remember, yeah, yeah.
Patrick, what's happening, man?
What's going on, brother?
Rocking in San Diego, man. I'm so glad we got to finally meet in person, and you know, I wasn't sure when it would be. We tried. I think we might have tried another location, whatever. But
there was like Chicago, and then just like 2 ships passing in the night.
Yeah, that's right. Chicago.
But you're in my home state, so
awesome.
Here we are.
And you flew in just for this, and it means the world to me.
I appreciate that.
I'm very grateful that people show up to these things if they're in the town, but let alone fly in just for this. So thank you very much, man.
It was only a 30-minute flight. Let's not,
but still, you got on a plane, bro. It matters to me, man. So I just want you to know that. And I want to start our conversation with, this is something that really intrigued me. You've had success in the industry and the entertainment industry, but you got humbled. And you told me when you started having some success, we had a phone call one time, and when you started having some success, it kind of got to you a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then you were humbled.
Yes.
And can you kind of take us through that journey? Because I think it's very important for people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I got humbled 2 ways. One is, the thing about the entertainment industry is it's one of those industries that you are so passionate about. It's one of those like dream jobs that you dedicate your life to. I loved making movies ever since I was a kid. I had a camcorder when I was 9, making stop motion claymation shit, and then graduating to kind of TV shows in college, and then so it was always kind of like what I wanted to do. And I moved out to LA, and when you get into it, it is a stab you in the back, fight, to get ahead, aggressive industry, or what it was. And so, when you finally start kind of climbing the ranks, you kind of get a little bit of an ego, because it's almost kind of like, I went through the shit. Now I can like give the person next to me shit, because I earned it. Right.
Yeah.
Which is the worst way of thinking. But, at the time, as far as I knew, I was kind of the alpha of producers, because I was making my way, climbing the ranks. And then, the first thing that happened was all of a sudden one day, my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I think I was so into, what I was doing and the project I was working on that I kind of ignored it. Right. And because to me, it was always like, well, I have to work on this next thing because it's going to help elevate me, and my career is so tied to this. And time went by, and between diagnosis and my mom's death was 36 days. Jeez. And I got there 3 days before she died, when my siblings had the time to actually talk to my mom and have sort of those last moments. I missed that opportunity. And all of a sudden, my life changed at that point. And that was 7 years ago. And what was important didn't seem to be important anymore. All those schedules and your job and your career path and all of that just didn't matter, because I've lost the one person that supported and cared about me the most, right? And that really first changed my entire perception of what I was doing. I still loved what I did, but it gave me a new view of empathy, of like seeing from others' personal views and knowing that, everybody is struggling in their own way, shape or form. If somebody's acting awkward, give them the benefit of the doubt. They might be having a rough day. And then it gave me more of this, at the same time that I lost my mom, I also gained a son. I became a dad, and through that transition, all of a sudden, it's like you start wanting to be a protector and take care of people and a provider. And as the industry kept, going on over the years, and switched to streaming, we've had this kind of complete change and evolution that's currently happening in the industry. And all of a sudden everything stopped, and including my work as a showrunner. So now I've kind of taken the step of also caring for my crew in being very vocal about the changes that are happening in the industry and talking more about how people can either pivot their careers or their lives, make the changes that they need to kind of adjust to this new industry.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff would you do to people that were working around you that was kind of, you look back and cringe now?
Oh, it's just like, it was just kind of a grind. I remember like one time I had one producer who was my boss tell my other boss, like, yo, you got to get your pit bull on a leash.
Yeah.
Because he was referring to me. Because I was just aggressive, just in terms of like making sure that we're on deadlines, and it didn't matter how I treated the person. It was making the deadline, making these, right. It's you're working a fast-paced environment. It's just kind of treating people without care, treating people with, in a transactional sort of way, which I mean is legal, but it doesn't gain you anything. You gain more with sugar than you do with vinegar, right? Yeah. And not treating people as people, and I think I was just more like, I was very self-absorbed. You think that you've earned a right to be a certain way, and again, just kind of being humbled by, like you said, by all that, and realizing, hey, being an asshole is not a good look.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of people are, and there's a lot of people that have success being an asshole.
Yes. And you don't necessarily need it.
Right. So how do you balance, though, making deadlines and getting things done on time and in the way that needs to be, with also empathy?
Delegation and trust. Like trust is earned. And I tend to work with a lot of people that I've developed trust over sometimes decades. And knowing that the person that I'm choosing to be on a project has my back when I'm not looking, that is the most important thing to me. Yeah. And then that makes them happy because I'm not being a micromanager, and I say, look, we have to have this done by this date. I don't care what you do. You go to water parks all day and work throughout the entire night. As long as you are meeting that date at 1 o'clock, the project is done. That makes me happy. And that's how a lot of people prefer work to be done too.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. I've been mentored by some of the greats in business. Yeah. One of the biggest lessons I learned was align the business's goals with the people in the company's personal, professional, financial goals. Mm-hmm. And when you align that, they're going after their personal, professional goals, and you made sure it aligns with the film, the TV show, or whatever, the business. And when you do that, some magic happens. Yes. And now everything's moving in the same direction. And I'm the same exact way with time. Like, I don't care. I'm not an hourly guy. Like, we get the job done. Here's what needs to be done. Yeah. No excuses. And if we need to move things, we need to renegotiate to stay in integrity with each other. Yes. So if you can't get something done and you're not going to make it, let's renegotiate, communicate with me, and we'll always be cool.
I always say, I don't care if there's a problem as long as you tell me there's a problem. There's nothing more than I hate than people who hold on to the problem until it becomes out of their control and then try to save it themselves. They're like, I'm coming to the rescue. It's like, no, man, this is burning all of us, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So you've worked on some big projects, right? Amazing Race, Big Brother, Naked and Afraid was another one?
Yep.
Okay. So a lot of people have heard of these. When was your first break into something which you would consider like, man, I made it?
It's interesting. I've had a few breaks into TV. My first break was out of college. I got a job as an intern at CBS News, and I worked in New York City running what was the early show, which was the morning show at the time. And
who were the people on there then?
Oh, gosh. It was Savannah Storm. Julie Chen, who is actually the host of Big Brother.
Yeah.
Harry, I forget. These are people that are long gone. And what was more interesting was actually the next year I worked at Court TV, and then it was Nancy Grace, Kimberly Guilfoyle, and Savannah Guthrie were all working there at the same time. And that was like during the Michael Jackson trial, and that was wild. But then I decided that I wanted to get into entertainment. I moved out to Los Angeles, so then I needed my break number 2, right?
Wait, before you go to that, how were you treated in your position then by those people? And you don't have to say specific names of who they were, but like what did you learn from working under them and around them?
You know, I learned that in a corporate environment, people want you to stay in your place. Like people, you know, you're supposed to know your role and do, you know, and I've always been like an ADHD kid. So I've always had like my head poking up or like wanting to like, you know, learn from other people or sticking my head in other people's doors. And that wasn't necessarily always like, you know, it was always like, where's Patrick? Why isn't he at his desk? You know, and I was always like, you know, I wanted to hang out with the documentary guys and learn what they were doing. So I learned that. I also learned that the best way I could explain it is I remember I had a boss at Court TV, and she made a lot of bad calls, right? And I remember I got so frustrated with it because even as a production assistant, I felt like I knew what was the obvious call. I remember calling my dad once, and I was just like, Dad, like, you know, this boss of mine, and he was like, well, Patrick, you know, you were an A student, right? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you went to school with C and D students? I go, yeah. He goes, well, they get jobs too. And that was kind of like you know, this is not like necessarily going to be a collaborative environment. It was going to be like, it wasn't going to be like film school where everybody kind of applauds what you do, right. and like everybody, it's communal. It wasn't communal. All of a sudden it became like, oh, you're on your own and you're kind of thrown into the masses, and it's a matter of survival. And gather as
much information, data that you can to propel yourself to the next thing, right? Do your job while you're here. Just get the job done, knowing that it's not permanent.
And I also learned that not taking the safe route was a way that you could get places quicker. Because I ended up working at E for 2 years, E Entertainment on True Hollywood Story.
I was just hanging out with Larry.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, I worked on True Hollywood Stories for like the first 2 years when I moved out to LA.
I love those, man.
Right.
I think the reason I like podcasting is because I like the behind the scenes and the documentaries. Yeah. I'm a buff on that.
Yeah,
so podcasting's similar. When I'm asking these questions, you get.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would really, you know, gathering all the photos. You know, the ones that like go in. They change into like, and then the bad stuff happens.
The people like that are whatever you're doing the documentary on. How do you cultivate all those pictures?
Usually you do it 2 ways. Sometimes if they're cooperating with the show, like, and they're going to sit down and do an interview, they'll give you pictures themselves. And if they're not going to cooperate with the shows, then you would probably go through like an image service, like Getty Images. Right. And then you would just kind of purchase the photos.
Gotcha.
But at E, you know, I was kind of like a grunt, you know, coffee getter, but also kind of sticking my nose in doors and learning how to edit and learning how to, it was fun because the joke was you can't spell cheap without E. So it's like, and it was a place where you kind of could make mistakes and no one would really notice it. So it was a great learning place. But at the time, this was like 2006, and reality TV was really kind of in its boom phase. So while I was working at E, like this new thing called the Kardashians was starting up, and I was like, what the fuck's a Kardashian? Yeah. And then all of a sudden it became, by the way, I'm allowed to curse on your shows, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just
say whatever you want.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
I just realized that I'm like, oh man,
you're all good, man.
I have an Irish dock worker's mouth sometimes.
Yeah, that's all right.
So while I'm working at E, you know, I get an opportunity to work on this reality show called Kid Nation, which I don't know if you remember that one. It was like Lord of the Flies, but that was my big break. And even though that wasn't that show didn't like go on multiple seasons, because it was CBS, I met all these producers from The Amazing Race and Big Brother, and you know, and I kept my nose to the grindstone, and I double hustled on that show. To make sure that I got noticed as an associate producer, and I did. And then my career was just kind of sky was to the moon after that.
And that's after you moved to LA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I cut you off when you moved to LA. A lot of people come to LA and they're just like, I'm gonna figure it out, and they just come out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that what it was for you, or did
It
you
was.
have something lined up?
I
Or no?
I went blindly, and and my parents and everybody in my family is on the East Coast, so they were just like, don't do it. You got a nice job in New York, don't. And I think my dad finally was just like, I could either give him my blessing, or he's gonna go either way, so I can't stop him. So my dad got in a U-Haul with me, we did New York to LA, and I got there, and he basically was like, you got 2 months, kid, and
But you drove from
from New
New
York
York to LA
in a U-Haul
with your dad.
with my dad.
Okay, so what were the conversations like on that trip?
Oh my gosh, to be a fly on that wall.
You
Well,
remember?
here's the thing. If you understood who my dad was, like my dad was this old Italian, immigrant, stubborn as a mule. Yeah. Like he wanted to beat the cross country U-Haul record of how fast you could get from New York to LA. Like, and he has it down to the T. Like we're going to be in Oklahoma City. And meanwhile, I'm like a kid who's like 22 and never seen the country, and I'm like, can we stop at the St. Louis brewery? He's like, no. I think the one compromise was to see the Grand Canyon, and he gave me like 15 minutes, and he's like, look at it. If you want to look at it, go to the gift shop, get the picture book, and you can read the pictures of it. We got to make LA by sundown. So it's like, it was good to be. It was just, I love my old man. I loved him to death. He was just. The fact is, I look back at it, and I think the special thing was my dad was 80 at the time when he did
was he
that.
really?
Yeah, my father had me older in life, so he had me when he was 54. So I think the best special part about it was I had an 80-year-old father in the U-Haul driving cross country.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. When you were telling the story, I didn't realize he was that old. At that time. So,
that's the twist in it.
Oh,
so
man.
Saving that for the end.
And then he tells you got 2 months.
Yeah.
And you came out. I guess you had an apartment. Were you rooming with someone? Did you find somebody to room with?
I got. Well, it was back in the day when a 1-bedroom apartment in LA was $700 a month. Which if you could get that now, good luck to you. So it was you could make like 2 months work, and I had money saved up from my job in New York. So. But it basically, my dad was like, I'm rooting for you, but you basically got 2 or 3 months to find land work, or, the dream's gonna dash. So I hit the ground hustling any person I knew or had the minor connection with. I called up, and then amazingly, there was a position open at E Entertainment that I got the interview for, and it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to at least get my foot in the door, and I was working in the industry.
You didn't have another job outside of entertainment?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you just
no.
went right in.
I amazingly got the job within 3 weeks. Of living in LA.
How about relationships when you got to LA? Was it tough to make relationships?
It was tough to figure. Oh yeah.
Because by the way, we hear about it all. It's superficial there.
Yeah.
You hear all these different stories.
It is and it isn't. I realized that the entertainment industry is still a business, and there's the part that's the superficial, the transactional, the very shallowness, and that really is kind of on the talent end of it. Like that's the red carpet bullshit and actors being method actors and not showing up to set because of drugs and whatever. But if you think of it, like the entertainment industry is a business, and it can't function like the people on the red carpet do. Otherwise it would fail as a business. So you realize the people behind the scenes are actually down to earth, normal people who come from the same part of the country. A lot of times there's a lot of Northeasterners, a lot of alumni from my school are in the industry. I went to Syracuse. So really you became friends with, it turned out that like a lot of my classmates ended up being like executives at Netflix or like, running like a high VP position at Lionsgate. So, you kind of networked with the people that were trying to raise their own careers, but also, we have kind of an all ships rise philosophy. You know who your friends are. And the thing about LA is it's not one city. I always say it's 88 towns trying to be a city. So you can find, if you want to, hang with the people that have the collagen lips and and are trying to write screenplays in a coffee shop, you could find that. If you want to hang out with the beach bums of the South Bay, you could find that crowd too. Or you could find like just a bunch of like, people who want to go axe throwing on a Wednesday night. So like there is that community there, but I feel like that community is also in every other city in America.
Yeah,
It just gets kind of, there's a steroid of it in LA. Yeah.
Right. And did you ever get wrapped up in the party scene at all?
Oh, yeah.
And also party scene with behind the scenes people, but also did you get tied up with any people that were in front of the camera? Not tied up in a bad way, but I mean you were hanging with them and kind of getting sucked into that.
You know, when I worked at E, it was very celebrity driven, you know, and I think that was when I would say a little bit more rough and tumble on the Sunset Strip and doing that, but it didn't take me a long time to figure out that Steven Spielberg wasn't on the Sunset Strip.
Right.
George Lucas wasn't fucking shaking his ass, you know, under the disco ball. The people that were actually the movers and shakers of the industry were not like going out getting fall down drunk and doing blow off a urinal. They were actually they were sticking to their craft. So I think, like, you know, in my early 20s, probably by the time I got to 25, I had figured that out. And that's how I think my career took off at such an early age, was realizing, again, like, make friends with the people that want to mentor you. You know, find who those people are and latch on to them. Don't latch on the people that are promising shit to you in the club.
Right.
Talk to the people who
That's very easy to do.
And it's very easy
you get
to
sucked
do.
into that because you have this, no matter if you're in front of the camera or behind it, you still want to, like, the fame thing can get you.
Yes,
right?
it can.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting is because I'm experiencing fame, and we had this discussion earlier. I'm experiencing it more now than I ever had, but I also had a 20-year career producing reality television and seeing what fame does to people, seeing what happens when people are ultimately just trying to chase that. It's a drug.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I could take it or leave it. But I realized that, you know, if you do have a power to reach people, you need to provide a service to them. You need to, whether that's information, whether that's educational, like, if you're going to have that power, you know, make that power for good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fame, so there's an ego thing.
Yeah.
And if you let it feed your ego, that's a bad road to go on.
Yeah.
But the ones that win are the ones that get fame, which is really attention. Right. And they leverage it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So where's this, like, can you think of a story that you've seen somebody that gained fame pretty quickly?
Yeah.
And they leveraged it? Does anything stick out? And you were like, wow, this person's like, they're on the right foot.
It's kind of my own story. You know?
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
But you know, it's so a perfect example was I did some TikToks for a little bit talking about unscripted TV, and you know, that got me used to being in front of the camera. I did that during the pandemic when I had nothing else to do, because I dared myself to beat a Gen Zer. I was like, you know what? I'm a TV producer. If I can't make a TikTok, like, then who am I? You know? And it somehow slipped that I was a TV producer and people wanted to know more about it. So I started creating. I got a little bit of a following doing that. But when the TV and film industry kind of went by the wayside a couple years ago, when everything switched to streaming and revenue streams weren't as big anymore, and people were going to social media, and the industry kind of came to a standstill after the strikes and really hasn't started back up. I started becoming more vocal about that because many people who worked in the industry had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, as an executive producer who has also been in the trenches and been with the crew and started as an assistant and worked my way up and did every job under me, you know, I understood those struggles. I understood who my crew was. I knew their families. I knew what they were going through trying to get food on the table and keep the lights on. So I became very vocal about what was happening in the industry so people could understand if they needed to pivot, if they needed to change their career path, if they wanted to get into something else, that they knew what was happening, because the rug was pulled out from everybody and nobody knew what was going on. And then in doing that, you know, my social media started kind of gaining popularity. People wanted me to talk more. I mean, I'm talking to you right now because of it. And then it also led, you know, what was it, Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world? And I said, okay, well, I actually started creating a platform with a bunch of other filmmakers, and it's called the Share Platform. And it's a place where filmmakers and creatives can lean into that creative economy, which we're turning into now. So, you know, it's a case for me of I got handed lemons and all right, let's make some lemonade. Yeah.
And then you worked on these projects. Have you ever thought about, or did you ever work on a project of your own design or making, or did you discovery?
I always got knocked out last minute. Like I got so close one day with a project that I had with Amazon for a reality show, and it was getting ready to be greenlit. And then the final meeting they were going to have was March 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and they're like, we're not making TV shows anymore. It got died on the vine.
And could that have like came around now?
Well,
still good
the
idea,
problem
or
is
no?
after the pandemic, and when everything switched to streaming, it became this IP only type of market for the film and television industry. They're only buying things that have intellectual property attached. So original ideas, even if they're in terms of game shows or reality shows, unless it had something that could be marketable attached to it, whether that was a celebrity, a brand, they are like, our mandate now is we don't buy anything without IP attached. And so even you could have, and this has been sort of the struggle of the industry right now, is you have people that have amazing scripts or amazing show ideas, and they're getting cast to the side. And it's frustrating because they're going to say, okay, we're going to make Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and we're going to make it a remake. And you're like, how many scripts got passed up for this one remake? So that's where we're kind of at right now in the industry, where there's a lot of creatives who are saying, you know what, I'm going to blaze my own path. And there's so many people who are doing podcasts or their own YouTube channel that it's just so easy now with the technology to go out and make your own show, that we're seeing so much proactivity and so much entrepreneurship and people actually wanting to do that.
Yeah. So with that project that you had, could you find a celebrity attached to it? Or IP
You know what?
attached to it?
It's funny because it's like the network is what tells you to do that, and you're like, but you're the network. You know, you got to realize the network. You got all the cash. You have all the connections. Everything that I'm doing to pitch this, I'm doing on my own dime. I'm doing on my own time, and so it's like it's really unfair to the people who are creating the projects, because it's, again, you put this whole show together and you still don't have a guaranteed yes. And they're like, you go find somebody, and you go, okay, you go and find somebody, but that's still no guarantee that the show's going to get made. And again, it's just more time wasted. And you're like, and then you're just giving up your own cut of an ownership of the project, you know, for this other big company to supposedly produce it for you. And I think at this point, you're starting to realize it's like most of the people that are in this gatekeeping system, it's easier for them to say no than say yes. Nobody gets fired for saying no.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I also saw some content that you put out talking about like these streaming platforms are dumbing down content.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Because they're, you know, it takes away from the art.
Right.
Right.
There's, you know, so again, like, having tech come into the entertainment industry, it really kind of steamrolled it. They're doing what they're doing to the traditional networks and legacy media corporations, what they did to Twitter. You know, they're going through and they're trying to cut everything out. And Jon Stewart put it best, because it's like, you know, writers, you don't just write from 9 to 5. You could be banging your head on the wall for a week, you know, before you come up with a great idea. Creativity doesn't, you know, it's
not on demand.
It's not on demand.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're looking at bottom lines, you don't understand why are there 10 writers, you know, and why is this taking 1 month? Well, you need 2 writers and you could do it in 1 week. And so that's kind of already starting to chip away at sort of the artistry and the art form. And one, that doesn't make things as good. The product is good. But then the problem that some of the streamers are encountering now is that they have what they call the 2-screen problem, which is I'm on my device and I'm watching TV at the same time.
Yeah, attention device.
Right?
Yeah, division
so
of attention.
They're all of a sudden they're saying that, okay, you're going to start missing plot points. So, you know, where a traditional movie screenwriting, if I'm angry, I would just like take a plate and break it.
Yeah.
They're now saying, okay, just write into the script, I'm angry.
Right.
And it just makes it so horrible sounding. But the problem is they don't realize that the best shows, you actually put your phone down to watch. Like if it's a really good show, I won't be on my phone. I will be engaged. But they're sort of believing that, you know, the metrics that they're getting is what determines what the creative is that gets made. and it's just sort of a wrong approach, and they can't understand why they're not connecting and engaging with their audience.
Yeah. What's your favorite show on right now, or what have you been watching?
Recently, probably The White Lotus.
Yeah.
Season 3.
But they have celebrities attached to that, right? So that's how
they're very, but Mike White is a brilliant writer, but what also, if you look at that show, that's a slow burn. Most of that doesn't follow the Netflix model. Netflix is like, I want to beat you over the head in the first 3 minutes, and you're watching a mystery, and you're going to, you need to be startled or surprised every 3 minutes because the metrics say, like, White Lotus, it doesn't get good for the first 4 or 5 episodes. You're just kind of like, okay, but you're intrigued, you're engaged.
Yeah. 100%.
So, and the same with Severance. Severance is an original show.
That's the slowest starting.
There's
show
the
I've seen
slowest
in a
start,
long time.
but
I
again,
couldn't.
it goes against the Netflix model, which is saying we need to grab your attention immediately, which is sort of the social media model. So, but is Severance and White Lotus, are those hits with our generation, or is that they're hits with more our generation than the generation?
And those aren't on Netflix. Those are Apple and what's the other one? Max.
Apple and Max, exactly, which are more premium channels.
The music in White Lotus gives me anxiety.
Yes.
Did you pay attention to that? Like
I
when
think
you're
it's
listening to
supposed
it, it's like, I mean, gosh, darn, man, I'm sitting here like, why do I'm trying to go to bed. I watch shows with my wife at night. That's how we hang out at night. And I'm like going to bed, and I'm like, why am I so tense? Like, this is crazy. The other time, I travel a lot, so sometimes we'll catch up on shows when we're not together.
Right.
And she texted me one time, I'm done watching White Lotus. And I'm like, why? She's like, it's like a porno. And it's like, after a while, it's just like, so have you noticed too that they put a lot more nudity, a lot more alternative lifestyle stuff, and work these into films? And why is that? Is that because of the trend of the culture, or is it because they're trying to get attention? Or
I would say the nudity on White Lotus. I mean, that's just kind of always been HBO and Max's brand. On Game of Thrones there were a lot of dicks.
True. Yeah.
So it's like look, there's a dick, and you go, oh my god. It's like I didn't need to see that.
I'm so immature, man. Like every time there's a new dude on a show, like women, it's not like that. But when there's a new dude, I always giggle or laugh or something. I'm always like, what the hell's the matter with
right.
you?
I'm like, wow, that was the dude from what was that Mel Gibson Revolution movie? I was like, oh, that was the bad guy, and I just saw his his thing. That's crazy. I guess I more or less think I'm like I mean, bravo, because with my Irish meat and potatoes, I'm not gonna do it. It's like, I guess if you're blessed.
I'm Italian too. I'm 5'7". I'd still do it. What the heck? You know what I mean? I'm married 23 years. I'm good. No, but now as we wind down here, I want to touch on you talked about being relatable in your content that you're putting out yourself, right?
Yeah.
And being transparent has helped you connect with a lot of people. And when the work changes, then it doesn't just mean the entertainment industry, it's business in general. I changed careers at my early 40s.
Okay.
Right. And went into something totally different. I was in the mortgage real estate space. Now I'm in the podcast and entertainment space, really. But it hit the ego because cash flow is, a whole new thing. I'd never had to worry about that since I had success in business. Had to start thinking about that part and what's my next thing. And sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm supposed to be in this corporate thing. Like, can you take us through your journey with this? Because, and as you're moving on to your next thing, trying to find that next thing, just paint the picture for us there.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a kick in the gut especially when you've dedicated your whole life to a craft and doing things a specific way. To be fair, I think I was in denial of the fact that I was probably bored with it too.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, well, I got here, so I'm gonna cherish this, and this is my thing. Interestingly enough, when it all went away, you're taught to mourn when friends pass or when your family pass. You're never taught to mourn your career.
It's huge, dude.
It's huge.
I mean,
I realize, and it's different when you've made the choice to act, proactively leave your industry versus when the faucet just kind of went dry. And so, because I went through those stages with my parents, I lost my mom and my dad within the same year, and I all of a sudden picked up. I'm like, man, I'm angry. man, I'm bartering with like my career right now, saying like, oh yeah, I'll take the lesser job with the 40% beta. And I'm like, why am I begging for scraps of my old job? Oh my God, I'm in a stage of grief right now. But I'm trying to look at it from a positive, like, okay, right now the industry is decimated, right? So where there's chaos, there's opportunity. And maybe you need that kind of kick in the gut, that kick in the ass, the having the rug swept from under you to kind of wake yourself up to say, okay, maybe I need to make a change or I need to start doing something. And I actually had an agent, a big agent, call me not too long ago. And he was like, Patrick, I got to tell you, when you first started doing your thing, because when I first started doing the TikToks, talk about the industry, a lot of people thought that was career suicide. That was what you don't do. You ostracize yourself. Yeah. You get blacklisted. You don't talk about Fight Club. But when I did start doing it, I got this tsunami of support because finally everybody in the industry was like, finally somebody fucking said it. Somebody said the quiet part out loud. And so this agent called me and he's like, when you first did, I was like, man, I thought you were committing career suicide. But he goes, now I see you and you're in the front of the line for what's changing and what's happening next, and there's still a lot of people that don't want that change or are afraid to face that change and have their head in the sand because it's like the unknown and unfamiliar is terrifying to some people.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the people that have the suicide part stop.
Yes.
Like they commit to something like you did and then they get pushed back and they stop, right?
Yes.
But I think the people that have courage,
right,
and they're so convicted in it, and then you just lean into it, especially with social media. You have a platform now. Nobody can really stop you unless you get shadow banned or something like that. But like you have all these different platforms. If you're just committed to it and you keep going, you'll rise above all that.
Yeah.
Right.
And it started out that way. I remember like I told you, I started my career doing my social media career, I guess, doing like these TikToks. And I remember I have an agent too. And I remember him calling me, in between gigs and being like, so how's the TikTok thing going? And the way he said it was nice, like you're that's a cute little hobby and it's kind of embarrassing for you, that type of, and I felt embarrassed when he said that. And there was a long time that I did feel embarrassed about it. Like, like you said, you wake up and you go, what am I doing? I'm just like, people are laughing at me maybe. And then they're not laughing now.
So I had a lady ask me in front of an audience. It was on one of the social audio apps. And they said, where are you at right now? And I was in Austin. I said, yeah, I'm shooting the podcast out here. We're doing a tour. And some lady that has success in an industry, she said, I don't take this the wrong way, but who are you to be having a podcast? She doesn't even know me that well, right? And I said, well, I have one.
Yeah.
But I have this concept that we can store things in our trunk or our tank.
Yeah.
Everything that happens to us.
Yes.
And I wrote a book about this called Rocket Fuel, Convert Setbacks, Become Unstoppable. And it was a hit because of the fact that you can take things and put it in your trunk, which will slow you down and weigh you down.
Yeah.
Or you can put it in your tank and convert it into rocket fuel and become unstoppable.
Right.
And so I take that and I'm like, yeah, give me some more of that. So she said that to me. And then I just need a little more juice. And I used that for that. So final thing I want to talk about, how's your family life changed since you had that kind of awakening of, with your parents?
My wife is, I think my wife is still trying to process it. I have to give it to her though, because when a lot of this stuff was happening, and I used to complain because there's experts in the industry and I'm like, these experts have no idea what they're talking about because I'm on the front lines, I'm in it. Right. And I'm like, who are these to be an expert? And then my wife was like, well, why don't you just become an expert? And, no one's stopping you from becoming an expert if you know your shit, right?
Yeah.
But, I think the home life is still kind of, my wife is just kind of rolls her eyes when I'm like, look who's following me now. And she's like, oh my God, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So at home I'm dad. And that's my priority is to be dad. Yeah. I try to keep my kids off the internet. I don't want them to know what I'm doing, and then maybe they'll discover it later on.
Right.
But the thing is to try to keep home always home and comfortable and happy. And that's always my focus, and that's always my priority. Yeah, severance. Exactly. Exactly. If I could turn my brain off. So yeah, it's and I think that's what keeps us happy and healthy.
Well, where can people go deeper with you, man? I know Producer Patrick, right?
Producer Patrick on Instagram and TikTok. And then, again, check out our platform that we're creating for influencers and creatives and filmmakers called The Share Platform.
Where can they find that?
www.theshareplatform.com.
Okay, got it. Patrick, thank you so much for being here, man. I had a great
Mike,
conversation with you
appreciate
here.
it.
I really enjoyed it, and hope you guys all enjoyed it. It's That One Podcast with your boy C-Rock. Kins, where are you? I don't know where you are, Kins. No, you know, we love you and we miss you. Patrick, producer Patrick, I should say. And how do you pronounce it? Caligari. Go check him out and keep coming back. Make sure you subscribe right now. Don't put time into it. Just go right now to your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to That One Podcast with your boy C-Rock. And until next time, be that one.